I noticed the names file to make sure I don't reuse any. Let me write the story now. I knew something was wrong the moment he measured the kitchen with his eyes, not with a tape measure, not with his hands, just his eyes, slow, deliberate, the way a man takes inventory of something he plans to own. He thought I didn't notice. I noticed everything. My name is June. I am 63 years old. I own a house in Bozeman, Montana, that my husband Walter built with his own hands before his back gave out, and I have lived in it for 31 years. When Walter died 4 years ago, he left me the house, 11 acres, and a woodworking shop that still smells like cedar when I open the door. He also left me careful. He used to say, "June, you trust too easy. You see the best in people before they've earned it." He wasn't wrong. But I learned. Nor did I learn. My daughter Claire is 34. She has Walter's eyes, dark brown, a little too serious for her face, and his stubbornness, which used to drive me crazy, and now I consider one of her finest qualities. She works as a school librarian in Billings, an hour and a half from where I live, and she calls me every Sunday evening without fail. She called me one Sunday in March 2 years ago, and her voice had that particular brightness in it that I recognized immediately, the brightness of someone who has met someone. His name was Nathan. She'd met him at a fundraiser for the public library. He'd come in representing some property investment firms, she said. Very professional, very charming. They talked for 3 hours. He'd called her the next morning. "Mum, I think this one is different," she told me. I said the right things. I was happy for her. And I was, genuinely, at first. I met Nathan 6 weeks later at Claire's apartment over a dinner she'd spent 2 days planning. He was tall, well-dressed in that careful way that shows effort without admitting it, and he smiled with the kind of warmth that makes you feel seen. I'll give him that. He was good at making you feel seen. He held my hand when we were introduced and said, "Claire talks about you constantly. I already feel like I know you." And then, not 5 minutes into sitting down at the table, before the salad was even on our plates, he said, "So is your place in Bozeman the property you grew up on, or did you and your late husband buy it together?" I looked at him. "We built it," I said. "Walter built most of it himself. Beautiful area," he said. He nodded, like he was filing something. 11 acres, Claire mentioned. That's substantial for that part of Montana. Claire beamed at him. I picked up my fork. I told myself I was being unfair. The man works in property. It's natural. People ask about things that interest them. I've been known to ask strangers about their gardens. But he asked again at dessert, something about the western boundary, whether it reached the creek. And then again, when I was getting my coat, something about property tax assessments in Gallatin County. 3 times in one evening. 3 times before he'd known me 2 hours. I drove home in the dark, and I thought about what Walter would have said. I thought I already knew. The months went on. Nathan came to Bozeman twice, then 3 times. He was always pleasant. He always helped with dishes. He complimented my cooking in specific ways, not just, "This is delicious, but the seasoning on this is exactly right. Did you use smoked paprika?" The kind of detail that tells you someone is paying close attention. He and Claire looked easy together, happy, and every single visit he found a way to bring up the land. Once it was the shop. What would something like that appraise at these days, do you think? Once it was the access road, whether it was shared or private. Once he walked the back fence line with me, hands in his pockets, asking about what the acreage east of the property sold for years ago, whether I'd ever considered the mineral rights. I answered him pleasantly and said nothing about the fact that I had started keeping notes. A small spiral notebook, blue cover that I kept in the drawer beside my bed. Date. What he asked. How he phrased it. The look on his face when I answered. My neighbor Helen, 71, sharp as a tack, retired county clerk, came over for coffee one afternoon in October, and I showed her the notebook. She read every page without expression. When she finished, she set it down on the table and looked at me over her reading glasses. "June," she said, "you are not imagining things. Claire loves him," I said. "I know," she said. "That's the problem." I didn't sleep well that night. I kept thinking about what I'd seen, but couldn't quite name yet. It felt like a shape in fog. I knew it was there. I could sense its edges, but I couldn't see it clearly enough to point at it and say, "There. That." I called my friend Dennis in January. Dennis was Walter's college roommate, practiced real estate law in Billings for 30 years before he retired, and he owes me 11 years of Christmas cookies. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which is rare for Dennis. "Run me through the property setup," he said when I finished. I did. House, acreage, the shop, no mortgage, deed in my name alone, up to date on taxes. Walter's life insurance had gone into a CD ladder when he died. I'd done it carefully, with an advisor, and I understood what I had. About 400,000 liquid, the property worth considerably more than that in the current market. "Has he asked you to put anything in writing?" Dennis said. "No." "Has Claire ever mentioned anything about estate planning, future arrangements, anything like that?" "She asked me once if I'd updated my will after Walter died. I told her yes. She left it there." "Did he bring it up?" I thought back. He mentioned once that property like mine is hard to manage alone as you get older. He said he knew a trust attorney, said it very casually. Dennis was quiet for a moment. "June, I want you to do a few things. Don't move any documents. Don't tell Claire yet, not until we know more. And I want you to call your bank and put a notification on your accounts. Any changes to beneficiaries or authorized users, you get a phone call first." "You think he's that far along?" I said. "I think a man who mentions a trust attorney in the first year of dating someone's mother isn't making small talk." I did everything Dennis told me. I also drove to the county recorder's office in Bozeman on a Tuesday morning and made certified copies of my deed and filed them with Dennis for safekeeping. And then I waited and I watched, and I kept writing in the blue notebook. In February, Claire called me on a Wednesday, not Sunday. That alone told me something. "Mom, I have news." Her voice had that brightness again, turned up higher than I'd ever heard it. "Nathan proposed last night." I said yes. I said the right things. I was very good at saying the right things by then. After I hung up, I sat at Walter's kitchen table for a long time. Outside the window, the last of February's snow was melting off the fence line. The cedar shop door was latched shut against the cold. 11 acres of land that my husband's hands had mapped and fenced and loved. I thought about my daughter's face when she was 7 years old and brought home a bird with a broken wing, dead certain she could fix it, the absolute faith in her eyes that the world would let her. I picked up the phone and called Dennis. The engagement moved fast. Nathan pushed for a June wedding. "Why wait?" he kept saying cheerfully about everything. "Why wait on the venue? Why wait on the guest list? Why wait on talking to an estate planner?" That one came up over Easter dinner, offered so smoothly it almost slid past me. He had a colleague, he said, who specialized in family wealth transfer, very helpful for blended situations, very useful to think about before marriage joined two families. Claire nodded like this was reasonable. I put another forkful of ham in my mouth and smiled. I told Dennis that evening. He called me back the next morning. "I spoke to a contact at the county," he said. "Your future son-in-law has an interesting history. 2 prior LLCs, both dissolved. One involved a property dispute with an elderly woman in Great Falls, settled out of court, sealed. He's not a criminal, but he's not clean either." I sat with that for a long time. Here is what I want to tell you, what I wish someone had told me before any of this started. The hardest part was not the anger. Anger is simple. The hardest part was sitting across from my daughter at restaurant tables and at my own kitchen table and watching her laugh at something this man said, watching her rest her head on his shoulder and knowing what I knew, and choosing to wait, choosing to be sure before I broke something that might not be able to be put back together. I am a mother. I have been one for 34 years, and the one thing motherhood teaches you, if you let it, is that sometimes you cannot catch your child before they fall. Sometimes you can only make sure there is something solid to land on, but sometimes you can stop the fall entirely, if you are patient, if you are precise. In April, Claire called me and said Nathan had suggested they meet with his colleague, the estate planner, before the wedding, just to get a sense of options. She made it sound like a normal thing, a mature, practical, adult thing. That sounds premature, I said carefully. Mom, it's just a conversation. Sure, I said. Why don't the three of us have dinner first, before any meetings? I'd like that. She agreed. Nathan agreed enthusiastically. Of course he did. That dinner was on a Thursday in late April at my house. I made pot roast because it takes hours, and it fills the house with a smell that makes people drop their guard. I'd called Dennis that afternoon. I'd also made 2 phone calls to people Dennis suggested, a detective who had done the work on Nathan's background and Claire's doctor's office, where I found out through a friend of a friend who worked there. Nathan had called twice in January asking about my medication history, claiming to be a family member coordinating my care. I had not been sick. I had not needed coordinating. He had no idea I knew. That night at dinner, after the roast, after the wine, Nathan's second glass, I asked him, very gently, very pleasantly, how his business was going. He said, well. I asked about the LLCs, just by name, just like that, with butter rolls on the table and my good china out. His face moved in a way he didn't intend, just a fraction, a tightening around the eyes. Where did you hear about those? He said. Oh, I said, I take an interest in the people in my daughter's life. I always have. Claire looked between us. She'd been quiet for a moment, and this is the part I didn't know yet. This is the part I hadn't planned for, that turned out to be the grace in all of it. Claire put down her fork. She looked at me, not at him, at me, and she said, Mum, what do you know? Not defensive, not upset on his behalf, asking me. With those dark, serious Walter eyes. A fair amount, I said. Nathan started to speak. Claire put her hand up. Not to me, to him. And she said very quietly, let her finish. What happened next took about 20 minutes. I told Claire what I knew, in order, calmly, the way I'd rehearsed with Dennis, the questions about the property, the trust attorney suggestion, the calls to her doctor's office, the prior LLCs, the woman in Great Falls. I did not raise my voice. I kept my hands flat on the table. Nathan denied the doctor's office calls first. Then, when I told him I had the call logs, he said it was a misunderstanding. Then he said it was out of concern. Then he stopped talking. Claire was very still. After a while, she looked at him and she said, Get out of my mother's house. He tried. He tried the reasonable voice, the wounded voice, the you don't understand voice. She stood up from the table. She was 34 years old, and she looked in that moment like every strong woman who had ever sat at that table before her. He left. Claire and I sat at the kitchen table for another 2 hours that night. She cried for a while, which I expected. She asked me why I hadn't told her sooner, which I expected too. I told her the truth. I had to be sure. I had to have something I could actually hand her, not just a feeling. Because if I'd been wrong, if I'd gone to her in October with nothing but a blue notebook and a bad feeling, she might have chosen him over the doubt. And I couldn't risk that. I needed the doubt to be undeniable. She was quiet for a long time after that. The doctor's office, she finally said. Yes, he called her doctor's office. Twice. She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. He was going to use that somehow. To say you were, what, incompetent? Unable to manage your own affairs. I think that was the direction, I said. She looked out the window at the dark Montana night, and then pushed through some kind of legal arrangement before the wedding. That's what Dennis thinks. She was quiet again. Then who's Dennis? Walter's college roommate. He's a retired real estate lawyer, and he makes terrible Christmas cookies, and I called him in January. She laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh, but it was real, and it broke something loose in the room. We cancelled the engagement the next morning, jointly, with a letter Dennis helped draft. Nathan did not contest it. He left Billings within the month. The colleague with the estate planning practice turned out to have no verifiable credentials. Dennis checked. The June wedding date came and went like any other day. Claire drove up from Billings and we ate on the back porch and watched the sun go down over the 11 acres and didn't talk about Nathan at all. In August, she started dating a man named, well, I'll leave his name out for now. He teaches high school history. He came to Bozeman in September and he asked about Walter's shop, not the land. He asked if he could see Walter's work, the pieces he'd made. He spent 45 minutes in there looking at the dovetail joints on an old dresser Walter had finished the year he got sick. He came back inside and said, "Your husband was a real craftsman." I made him a cup of coffee and I thought, okay. I keep the blue notebook in the drawer still. I don't think I'll ever throw it out. Walter always said I trust too easy, but he also said I was the most stubborn woman he'd ever loved, and he said it like it was the finest thing about me. I think he was right about that one too. I've thought a lot about what would have happened if I'd done nothing. If I told myself I was being unfair that first night, suspicious, overbearing, the kind of mother-in-law people write about, and closed the blue notebook before it ever had a chance to fill up. I've thought about where Claire would be right now, where I would be, whether the cedar shop would still be mine, or whether some dissolution process would have quietly begun, the way water gets under a foundation, invisible until the whole thing shifts. What stopped Nathan wasn't luck. And it wasn't that he made some careless mistake I happened to catch. He was careful. He was patient. He understood that the most dangerous plans are the ones that look from the outside like nothing at all. What stopped him was that I was more patient than he was and more precise, and I refused to let my love for my daughter cloud what I was actually seeing. That's the first thing I learned from all of this. Love and clarity are not the same thing. A mother's love is fierce and it is real, but it can also make you look away from what hurts. I had to make a choice, over and over again across those months, to keep my eyes open, to write things down instead of explaining them away, to treat my own instincts as evidence worth keeping, not embarrassment worth hiding. The second thing I learned is about patience as a form of courage. People talk about courage like it's always loud, like it's standing up in a room and saying something hard. But sitting across from Nathan at my own dinner table, passing him bread rolls, answering his questions about the property with a pleasant voice while I knew what I knew, that was its own kind of hard. Doing nothing, visibly while doing everything quietly, requires a steadiness that doesn't get talked about enough. The blue notebook was an act of discipline. Every entry I made was a choice to wait until I had something real. And then there was Claire. I think about her a lot, about that moment when she put her fork down and turned to me instead of to him. She didn't ask me to reassure her. She didn't offend him out of habit or pride. She asked me what I knew, and then she listened. That took something from her, too. It is not easy to turn toward a truth that dismantles something you've built your happiness around. It takes a kind of inner honesty that can't be taught, only chosen in the moment when it costs something. The cost of telling the truth is almost always smaller than the cost of not telling it. That's what the woman in Great Falls found out the hard way, whatever her story was. That's what I was trying to spare my daughter from. Not pain entirely, because pain was always part of it, but the specific devastation of finding out years too late. Walter told me, I trust too easy. He was right. But what I found out is that trusting too easy and being easily fooled are not the same thing. You can be a person who sees the best in people and still keep your eyes open. You can be warm and careful at the same time. In fact, I think you have to be both. Warmth without careful attention is how people like Nathan find their way in. Careful attention without warmth is just suspicion, and suspicion alone never saved anyone. What saved Claire was a mother who loved her enough to be patient, precise, and honest, in exactly that order. And what saved me was a daughter brave enough to listen. I still have the notebook. I don't think I'll ever throw it out.